Hello, my name is Rod Schaefer, and I'm going to do a tutorial series on how to develop a real-world responsive web application using Laravel version 5.6 PHP Framework. Before we begin, I would like to cover a few things. Uh, you can always get to my blog articles by using my domain name, rodschaefer.com. The integrated development environment I'm going to be using throughout the tutorial series is PHP Storm version 2017. If you would like to look at using PHP Storm, just do a Google search for it. Some other IDEs that you could use are Sublime Text and Eclipse, for example. If you don't want to use any one of those, I would suggest doing a Google search for PHP Storm alternatives. The next thing I would like to cover is if you browse to my blog and you look at the top of the page, I have a menu bar that runs across the top. If you just click on the blog drop down and you can either go to all articles or the latest articles, I'm going to go to all articles. And the tutorial I'm actually working on is the first article here, the Create a Simple Blog using Laravel 5.6 Part 1. And if you, for some reason, can't find the article, because I may have put other articles in here and it pushed it off the page, for example, or something like that, you can simply just do a search up here for it, up here in this search box. So I'm just going to copy this, create simple blog, and I'm going to do a search for that. And that's a nice handy way to find or narrow down the article that you're looking for. So I'm going to go ahead and click the link for the article here. And if you look at the top of the article, I explain basically what I'm going to cover during the tutorial series. And then right below that, the paragraph below it, I explain what I'm not going to show you in the tutorial. And I'm not going to explain how to set up your development environment to develop web applications with Laravel. I'm just going to assume that you already have everything in place and that you take a look at the prerequisites for the tutorial and you make sure that you meet all these requirements. And then if you look at the paragraph just below that, I basically have on here what versions of everything I'm using so that if you want to follow along exactly, you can install the same versions, for example, if you want to. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to create the basic fresh Laravel application. And we need to first change to the directory that stores all of our web applications. That happens to be var www html tutorials on my system. So I'm going to come down here and copy this terminal command right off of my blog. And I'm going to open up a new terminal window. And I'm going to copy that or paste that into my terminal, and I'm going to hit the enter key. And that's going to put me in that folder. So you'll see we're in the tutorials folder. And then we pretty much have two ways that we can create the project. We could just use Composer itself and create the project that way. Or if you went the extra step and installed the Laravel installer, you can create the project that way as well. That's totally acceptable. I normally use the Laravel installer. However, I'm going to use Composer just to show you that you can do it both ways. And you'll notice here that I designated the version of the framework that I would like to use. You can do that with Composer. So you could actually target a version of Laravel, like 5.5 branch, for example. With the Laravel installer, you can't target a branch. It just pulls in the latest version. So that's one nice feature of using Composer. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to copy this next terminal command and I'm going to paste it into my terminal window. And you'll notice I named it L56 tutorial. That's the name of my project. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit the enter key on my keyboard. And what that's going to do is Composer is going to go out on the internet. It's basically going to search for the latest files in the 5.6 branch. It's going to download them and it's going to create our project. And so there it created our fresh Laravel application. I'm just going to go ahead and clear my screen out. And I just want to take a moment to explain something to you on Linux. If you use the up and down arrow keys on your keyboard, you can cycle through the commands that you had previously executed. And it's a nice way to quickly do another command. For example, if you have something you have to repeat, you don't have to type it in again. You can just use your up and down arrow keys, find it, and execute the command again, like clear, for example. So now what we need to do is we need to change to the L56 tutorial directory. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to copy this next terminal command right here off of my blog, and I'm going to paste that into my terminal window. And I'm going to hit the enter key, and that puts me in the L56 tutorial directory now. There is two things that we need to do to make sure that our fresh Laravel application will run properly. And there's two directories. There's a bootstrap directory and a storage directory, and they both need to have read, write, and execute permissions for everyone. And the way that you do that on Linux is it's a command called chmod, which is change mode. And the -R is recursively. So what that means is it goes inside the bootstrap folder on this command, and it changes the permissions on everything inside the folder. That's what recursive does. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to copy this next terminal command off of my article. I'm going to paste it into my terminal window, and I'm going to hit enter, and then I'm going to clear the screen out, and I'm going to do a directory listing so I can show that the permissions have actually changed. The way that you do a directory listing on Linux is through a command called ls. And then I like using the -L, which is switch L, and it basically gives more information when you do the directory listing. And if you look up here at the bootstrap folder, you'll notice that we have read, write, and execute permissions for the first three are for the owner of the file. The next three is for the group. So you can set up like a group of users. And then the last three is for everyone else. And so now we have read, write, and execute permissions for everyone else. And if you look at the storage folder, we haven't done that one yet. So we only have read and execute permissions. So we need to do that one as well. So I'm going to go in here and copy the next terminal command. And I'm going to go ahead and paste that into my terminal. And I'm going to hit enter. And then I'm going to clear my screen out so I can show you easier. And you'll notice now the storage folder has the same permissions, read, write, and execute for everyone. Now, before we go on any further, I just want to explain something to you real quick. Laravel has a bunch of commands to make things easier and quicker to develop web applications. The way that we execute those commands is through what is called PHP Artisan. So if you just enter PHP Artisan in the root directory for your web application, it will bring up all the commands that are available to Laravel. So I'm just going to go ahead and toss that into my terminal here real quick so I can show you. And if I scroll up, you'll notice that there's quite a few commands here. So if this is something new to you, this is your first time, or you haven't used Laravel very much, don't get nervous or discouraged because you may not know what everything does here. We're not going to use all these commands, but I assure you when we do use the commands that we're going to use, I'm going to explain what we're doing. So I just wanted to show you that because you may want to bring that up and just take a look at it, start to familiarize yourself with it a little bit. Now, we are going to use the Laravel Authentication scaffolding, so that way when users can register onto our blog, and then they'll be able to actually log into the blog after they register. And Laravel gives us a way to do that for free, basically, just by executing an artisan command. And if we go back to the listing here of all the commands, at the top here under the make section, you'll see there's a make auth command. And if you read the description of it, it says it gives you basic login and registration views and routes. So all we have to do is execute that, and Laravel is going to give us the pages and the routes that we need for free. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to copy this next command off of my blog article, and I'm going to paste it into my terminal. Let me clear my screen out here first so it'll make it easier to show you. And then I'm going to hit the enter key, and you'll notice it says the authentication scaffolding has been generated successfully. So that basically just gave us what we needed for free. Now, as we develop our application, we're obviously going to want to open our application in a web browser and be able to test it and view what we have done. And there's a couple of ways that we could do that. The real quick and easy way is to use the built-in PHP web server that comes with Laravel. And the way we would do that is we put in a command called PHP Artisan serve. Now, there is some limitations to that, and the better way to do things would be to set up a vhost alias with Apache Web Server. And that's the way I'm going to do things through the remainder of the tutorial. And don't get discouraged. I'm going to explain to you how you can set things up the same way I'm doing it once we get to the end of the tutorial here. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to start this up so I can show you what we have so far. So I'm just going to copy that. I'm going to paste it into my terminal, hit enter, and you'll see that it says the Laravel development server was started. And the address that we need to view our application is in between these brackets. So I'm just going to go ahead and put my mouse pointer over top of that address. I'm going to right click and I'm going to say open link, and that will open it up in a web browser. And here is the freshly created Laravel application that we just created. And you'll notice that there's a login and a register link up in here because we used that make auth command. And we can actually click on these and we can view what the pages look like. Now, we won't actually be able to log in or register at this point in time because we didn't set any database up yet. We're going to do that in part 2 of the tutorial. And later on down the road, we're actually going to modify this and we're going to make it look different. And then the registration page is there as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and close this back out. And if you do things that way, you'll notice that the PHP web server is still running. So the way that you shut it down or exit it is in the same terminal window that you used to start it up. You would simply hold down your control key on your keyboard and press the letter C, and that exits out of the PHP web server. So getting back to the creating an Apache vhost, and I'm also going to generate a TLS certificate, which is an SSL certificate for the local development on my server here. This way, as we're developing our application, when we have pages that need to be secure and we need to test them, we will have a way to do that. So if you would like to set things up the same way I'm doing things, if you look at the bottom of my article here, I have a link to the article that explains how to generate your own SSL certificate. So it's this Act as OpenSSL Certificate Authority tutorial. So I would suggest working through that tutorial series. That will help you generate your SSL certificate. And then once you generate the certificate, if you read my how to install a TLS certificate into Apache 2 tutorial, it will explain to you how to actually create the Apache vhost aliases that you need and also install your SSL certificate. So that pretty much concludes part 1 of the tutorial. I'll see you in part 2.